So let's have a look at the first sequence from this run that I played before in the previous video. What I'm doing is it's very simple actually, and that's really the power of this sequence. It has another advantage over just being a simple one-string sequence that you repeat across the neck or across the strings. It's also a matter of, because when you're tapping, when you go from string to string and you have to make the string shift with your left hand, you have the fourth, the third, and the second and the first finger. And the fourth finger is actually very good at tapping. Just, you know, when you go from... It's pretty good at that. So any sequence that changes strings by using the fourth or the third finger, or even the second finger, are very effective sequences, because you don't have to, you know, do this with the first finger, and most people are not very good at tapping with the first finger initially. But it's as easy as tapping with the other fingers. You've just been using this as a kind of as a backstop or as a bar across the strings, and not so much as a because, you know, when you're playing three notes on one string, when you do like that, the first finger just stays there, so it's used to just staying there. But we're going to look at that challenge in another video. But this sequence has no first finger tapping. It's fourth finger or third finger when you change the strings, and that's go from string to string, and that's really a great help. In this example, I've chosen the C minor pentatonic, or the C blues scale, in the first position. So we're in the 8th fret here. We have the C right there, and you have your standard first position blues scale right there. You know, you have a minor interval on the low E string, 8th and 11th fret. Then you have these three notes there in the 8th, 9th and 10th fret on the next string. Then the next string looks like this. I hope you, or not hope, I assume you know this shape. Then you have the 8th, the 10th and the 11th, and then you have two minor thirds again on the top strings here. So what do? Well, on the first string, we simply do this. Let me just kick out the sauce here. I'm simply, in the beginning, the first string looks a little different because it has one extra note. But what I'm doing is, if you imagine you have your two pentatonic notes here in the 8th and the 11th, and then we add one up here. From the next vertical shape, you might say, in the 13th fret. This gives you this structure, 8th, 11th and 13th. And you just place your fingers there. And then you start by tapping with the fourth finger, like that. And then you tap with the first finger over here. So, and then you pull off again with the first finger on your right hand. So you go, you just get a little bit of this, like that. Tap in the 13th fret, and then release it again, or pull it off downwards. So you really not just remove it, but really pull it off by pushing it downwards, or upwards for that matter. So you go tap with the fourth finger in the 11th fret, tap with your right hand first finger, and then pull it off again, and then pull this one off. That's the first little bit. So again, fourth finger, 11th fret, tapping, then tapping, first finger, right hand, 13th fret, pull it off again, and pull this one off. So basically, you're going up from this one, and then down from this one again. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 down to this. And the next thing you do is you just tap this 13th, the note in the 13th fret on the high E string again, and release it down to, not release, but pull off down to the 8th fret again. So you go, and then, so that's the whole melody. And then you just repeat it, and the second time around, you have that string sounding out. So it's very easy for you to go tap that note again with your fourth finger, and then go. Let me play the whole thing slowly, but fast enough for you to get the melody in your head. No, sorry. And that's the whole thing, almost. The rest is details, but what you do with this then is just sit down, because this is the whole run encapsulated into one string exercise. And if you can do the one string exercise, going from string to string is going to be relatively easy, or even just easy. So you go. And practice this with a metronome. Say, whatever tempo. I have a hard time playing metronome with my mouth here, but and then you just play this over and over and over again. And what you then do when you shift strings is you just play the exact same thing. So you went from, right, that was the whole thing. Then instead of starting over on this string with your fourth finger, you're just starting over on the B string with this finger. And because the scale looks like it does, it's the exact same frets on the B string. So now you have two strings. You can go, and then two, right? So instead of staying on one string, you're just going. That's a lick in itself there, and you can start moving that, you know, vertically, but just going for the next string, or you can move it up, but we'll just do that in a second. So let's look at the next string, because now we played. Then the next string, you find the notes in the 8th, the 10th, and the 12th fret here in the key of C minor, and so these are the notes on the G string. So we have the 8th, the 10th, and the 12th fret, just two whole tone intervals here. And you do the same thing, but now you tap with the third finger. So you go, and then you do the same thing, but with this instead of that. So you go, next string, next string. Then on the next string you have the 8th, the 10th, and the 13th fret instead of the 12th. So we go tapping with the third finger again in the 10th fret. And you do the same thing in the same frets on the A string. And then you can do it in the 8th, the 11th, and the 13th fret on the low E string. Just the same frets as on the high E string. And then you can practice going up again. So you can take it back and forth, it looks the same way, because it's a one-string sequence, really, that you're just moving up and down. So let me play that, just the whole thing slowly. Or semi-slowly here. Sorry. So very effective, and not that hard to practice. If you start on one string and just go and get that down first, and then go for the other string. And what you do with this, of course, if you're new to it, is that you first use the metronome, practice it in time, so you have a da 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 click, 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 click. So it gets a sound like click, click. See if you can play it in time, so you don't want certain parts of this to be faster than other parts. You don't want to practice like that. You have to practice in time. Do not do this. That is just a recipe for disaster, and you're not practicing anything when you're doing it. You're just practicing becoming a very bad, out of time player. So don't do that. Instead, use the metronome. Click, click, ba da 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 da. So in other words, this finger here should be totally steady. Da 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 da. Totally steady, rhythmically. So that's what you do with the metronome, and then you just set yourself in front of the TV for an entire week, each night, 3 to 4 hours, watching stupid sitcoms or whatever. You can watch something that's not stupid as well. It also works. And then you, with your metronome training, go... Don't play it fast. Play it perfectly. Do not make mistakes. That's why you say that perfect practice makes perfect, and that actually is true on the guitar. Making mistakes while you practice is not a good idea. To repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So you just practice. Just let speed follow, and then you'll follow. Because this is tapping and hammer-ons and pull-offs, you very quickly discover that if you just stick with the fully focused. Not fully focused because you're watching sitcoms, right? Or a movie. While you're doing this, da 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 da. And then gradually, after 3 or 4 days of this, it just becomes blah 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 blah. It just becomes one movement. And that's when you start listening for, are there any notes in this that are not clear? And it's often when you go from string to string. And then you can start, working on that and really emphasizing or even exaggerating those string shifts there. Listening for them. And focusing on them as you're playing fast. So, that's about it. For the actual run that I showed you in the previous video, we're in the key of A blues instead. But we're using a 3-note per string shape. I'm just not going to go a whole lot into that, but the 3-note and scale shape stuff here. But we're basically playing in octaves. And the, let me just see here. What we're doing is we're in the key of A minor or A minor pentatonic / A blues. And what I do is I start in this 3-note per string pattern up here, and this pattern actually ends down here and allows me to go down to the A again. We're going to take the ascending motion in the next session because that's something else I'm doing there. But so you have these 3 notes up here, E, G, and A, and we're in the 12th, the 15th, and the 17th fret on the high E string. Now those are the notes there, so just mark those out in your mind. Minor third and a whole tone interval from the 12th fret on the high E string. Then on the other string, and this is the whole shape that repeats itself down the neck, you have 13th, 15th, and 16th. So you have that little bluesy note there. If you want to play strictly pentatonic, you can just replace this note in the 16th fret with the one in the 17th fret, and you have no blue note. Also makes it the same frets that you're tapping here, which makes it a little bit easier. So, what I'm doing there is the same thing. I go something like that anyway. And all I do then is just do the same thing, but 1 octave lower. And that would look like this. On the G string, you have a note in the 9th, the 12th, and the 14th fret. So that's the same thing as up here, only one octave higher. And then right here, on the D string, you have a note in the 10th, 12th, and 13th fret. And that's the exact same shape here as up here. They relate to each other in the exact same way. What you do to get this right is that you mark out the place where you're shifting strings. So in your mind's eye, so you go, and then you mark that spot, that 12th fret there on the G string. You just mark that out in your mind's eye, so you can go, and then you know you're going to hit that note right there in the 12th fret with that finger, and that's how you change and go back to another or go down to another position where you can do the same thing. Of course, it repeats itself on the lower two strings here, and that would be on the E and A string in the 7th, the 10th, and the 12th fret. And then you have the 11th, the 10th, and the 8th fret. But just look in the tabs. And then I move down to the A again there. So that's basically the sequence. But then I add just a little thing to get this whole thing started. So instead of tapping, or you can of course do that, you can just start on the second note in the scale, or your three-note scale here, or you know how it looks on the E string. and then you instead of just starting there, you add a note. You add the first note on the string. So you just add that, and you can pick that. You can come down from that. You can go. So that's where you start actually. But I didn't include that because that would mess up the logic and the simplicity of the sequence there. So all you do is just play. But instead of going, you just hit that E there in the 12th fret first. So it comes to, instead of going, it just goes da 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 da. So there's a little inlet there, and it works really well to use that first note. So you just add that one note there in the beginning. A little way to expand it is to move your first finger in the right hand. So instead of let's go back to the C minor shape in the 8th fret instead. And because you can do a little variation here that actually makes the lick more complex. Instead of going that last note that you're tapping on each string, you move that down to the next note. So you go, and then instead of tapping that, you tap this. And that makes your hand go back and forth like that. So you go. So instead of having that anchor point or that pedal tone up there, you move it so you get a sequence that sounds like this. But that's another challenge, and I recommend that you start by learning that sequence first, and then going. Because of course, when you're jumping back and forth like that, you risk not hitting the actual note, and you can't really anchor your hand, because that would be logical to me. Just anchor my hand and then have the finger move instead. But that's not really practical because the angle of the finger goes like that. So I'm hitting one note like that and another note like that, and that just doesn't work because my nail is in the way here when I'm tapping like that. So you have to move your finger. But it's an option. But start with just the simple, and just get the experience of being able to play super lightning fast without having to spend months on it. Of course, this takes time. If you're a beginner or nearly a beginner, this takes time. But let's just say you just practice this like an insane person for a month each night, just in front of the TV. You just kept going back and forth, and then when you can do it like the fastest in the universe, you can start playing stuff, and then and start integrating it with what you know already. So you build that into it, so you can really use it when you improvise or play solos. So those were the words, and in the next video we're going to look at this upwards motion, or this ascending run, where we're doing something completely different. So until then, have a great time practicing this if you do want to.